The day I realized my husband had forgotten, everything I gave up for us was not loud. There was no shouting. No fighting.
No slam doors.
It was a quiet morning.
Too quiet.
I was standing in the kitchen, holding a chipped white cup, the one we had owned since our first year of marriage. The tea inside had gone cold, but I did not notice. My husband sat at the table, scrolling on his phone, barely looking up. I said his name. Once. Then again. He looked at me, not angry, not tired, just empty. Like someone looking at a stranger. "What is it?" he asked. That was the moment. Not the words, but the way he said them. As if I had not been his wife for 32 years. As if I had not built my life around his. As if all my sacrifices had faded into air. I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I did not want to cry. I turned back to the sink and rinsed the cup slowly, listening to the sound of running water fill the space where love used to sit. Inside my chest, something folded in on itself, very gently, like paper being put away. That morning felt like the end of something I could not name yet. And as I stood there, staring at my reflection in the kitchen window, I wondered how a man could forget a lifetime so completely, while still living inside it. I was not always this quiet woman. Once I laughed loudly. I dreamed boldly. I believed love would remember. When I met my husband, Daniel, I was 22. I still remember the smell of rain that day. We were standing under a small shelter near the bus stop, both pretending not to notice the storm. He offered me half his umbrella, even though it barely covered one shoulder. "You'll get wet," I said. "So will you," he replied, smiling. That smile stayed with me for years. Daniel was kind in a simple way. He listened when I spoke. He remembered little things. The way I liked my tea. The songs that made me cry. The fear I had of being left behind. I thought that kind of man would never forget. We married young. We did not have much money, but we had plans. Big ones. We used to lie on the floor of our small rented room, staring at the ceiling fan, talking about the future. "We'll build a life," he said. "Together," I replied. I believed that word more than anything. When Daniel got his first real job, it came with conditions. Long hours. Transfers. Uncertainty. He was nervous but excited. This could change everything, he told me. I had just been accepted into a training program I worked hard for. It was not famous, but it mattered to me. It was my step toward independence. But when Daniel looked at me that night, hope and fear mixed in his eyes, I already knew the answer I would give. "Take the job," I said. "We'll manage." That was the first thing I gave up. I told myself it was temporary. That love was about timing. That my turn would come later. Later is a word that sounds kind, but it can quietly steal years. We moved cities twice in 3 years. Each time, I packed our lives into boxes. Each time, I left behind something small but important. A chance. A connection. A piece of myself. Daniel worked harder. He climbed higher. People praised him. Family members said I was lucky. "You have a good husband," they said. "Yes," I answered. And I meant it. When our first child was born, everything changed again. I stopped counting days for myself and started counting them for others. Feedings. Doctor visits. School forms. Lunch boxes. Daniel came home tired. I learned not to burden him. "You rest," I said.
"Ivy fine."
I said those words so often that I almost believed them. Years passed like that. Quietly. Steady. Unnoticed. I learned to measure love in small ways. Did he eat the food I made? Did he ask how my day was? Did he sit beside me at night? Even in silence? Sometimes he did. Sometimes he did not. But I told myself marriage was not a storybook. That love grows quieter with time. That forgetting small things was normal. I did not realize he was forgetting bigger things too. The first sign came on our anniversary. I did not expect a gift. I never did. I only expected remembrance. That morning, Daniel kissed me on the cheek and left for work. "Happy anniversary," I said softly. He paused at the door. "Oh," he said, checking his phone. "Is it today?" I laughed. I made a joke. I said it was fine. But later, alone in the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed my hands together, trying to hold myself still. It was just a date, I told myself. But it felt like more than that. Another time, he told a friend, right in front of me, that he had built everything on his own. I worked day and night, Daniel said proudly. No sorkuts. I stood beside him, holding a tray of tea, invisible. I wanted to say something. I wanted to remind him. But the words stayed locked inside me, heavy and unused. That night, when I mentioned it gently, he frowned. I didn't mean it like that, he said. You're overthinking. So I stopped thinking. At least I tried to. I became very good at being quiet. Quiet when he forgot things I remembered. Quiet when he spoke over me. Quiet when my needs felt too small to mention. I told myself this was strength. But strength should not feel like disappearing. The house changed as our children grew. Louder at first, then emptier. Their rooms stayed the same, but the laughter moved away. Daniel filled the silence with work, calls, screens. I filled it with cleaning, cooking, waiting. Sometimes, I would sit by the window in the evening, watching the light fade, wondering when I had stopped being part of the picture. I still loved him. That was the hardest part. Love does not leave easily, even when it is forgotten. The morning everything came into focus was not special.
No celebration. No argument.
Just he gone cold, and a question asked without care. What is it? That was when I understood. He had not forgotten me all at once. He had forgotten me slowly, and I had helped him do it by never asking to be remembered. That day, after he left the house, I sat alone at the table. The clock ticked loudly, like it was counting something I could not see. I looked around the kitchen. The worn counter. The familiar walls. The life I had built quietly, carefully, lovingly. And for the first time in years, I asked myself a question I had avoided. What happens when a woman gives everything, and the person she gave it to forgets? I did not know the answer yet. But I knew the story was not over. After that morning, nothing changed on the outside. The house stayed the same. Our routine stayed the same. Daniel stayed the same. But something inside me had shifted, just a little, like a picture on the wall that no longer hangs straight. You may not notice it at first, but once you do, you cannot stop seeing it. I began to pay attention, not in an angry way, not in a blaming way, just in a quiet, noticing way. Daniel spoke more, but listened less. He talked about work, about plans, about people whose names I did not know. When I spoke, his eyes drifted back to his phone or the television. I would stop mid-sentence sometimes just to see if he noticed. He never did. So I learned to finish my thoughts inside my own head. There was a day I asked him something simple. Do you remember why I stopped working? I asked while folding laundry. He shrugged. Because you wanted to stay home, right? I folded the shirt carefully before answering. No, I said. Because your job kept moving us. Because childcare was expensive. Because someone had to be steady. He nodded, but his eyes were already somewhere else. Right, he said. That too. That too. Those words sat with me all afternoon. Small moments like that began to stack up. He forgot my doctor's appointment. He forgot the name of my childhood friend. He forgot I hated loud noises at night. Each time, I told myself it was nothing. People forget things. Life gets busy. But forgetting is different when it only goes one way. One evening, Daniel came home late. He barely glanced at the dinner I had kept warm. I already ate, he said. Meeting ran long. I nodded. It's fine. I ate alone at the table, listening to the food cool on my plate, the silence louder than any argument we had ever had. Later, as he got ready for bed, I said softly, I waited. He paused. I didn't ask you to, he replied. The words were not cruel. They were worse than that. They were careless. I started remembering things he no longer did. The nights I stayed up sewing torn school uniforms because we could not afford new ones. The weekends I skipped visiting my parents because he needed rest. The job offers I declined because they did not fit his schedule. None of those moments were dramatic. They were quiet choices, made out of love. But love that is not seen slowly becomes invisible. One afternoon, I ran into an old friend at the market. She looked at me closely before smiling. "You seem tired," she said gently. I laughed it off. Just life. But as we talked, she mentioned her work, her trips, her plans. I listened, nodding, feeling something tighten inside my chest. "What about you?" she asked. "What do you do these days?" The question surprised me. I started then stopped. I did not know how to answer. I went home that day feeling like I had misplaced something important and could not remember where I last saw it. Daniel began making decisions without asking me. He planned a vacation with his colleagues. He invited guests without telling me. He changed things in the house and expected me to adjust. When I mentioned it, he sighed. "You don't need to worry about these things," he said. "I've got it handled." I wanted to say that I had been handling things for years. Instead, I said nothing. At night, I lay awake listening to his breathing.
Steady. Calm.
Untroubled. I wondered if he ever lay awake thinking about me, about the girl under the umbrella, about the woman who believed in together, about the life we were supposed to share. The thought made my chest ache in a way that sleep could not fix. One morning, while cleaning out a drawer, I found an old letter I had written to him years ago. It was from a time when he was traveling often, and I missed him terribly. I read it slowly. I talked about waiting, about believing, about holding things together. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back. He had never mentioned it. I was not sure he even remembered receiving it. The conflict did not arrive as a storm. It arrived like dust, settling quietly on everything we shared, dulling the shine. And still, I stayed gentle. I stayed patient. I stayed quiet, because I thought love meant endurance. I did not yet understand that love also needs to be seen. One evening, as we sat across from each other at the table, Daniel said something that stayed with me longer than he ever knew. "You've changed," he said. "You're not as lively as before." I looked at him. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked, "Do you know why?" He frowned slightly. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe you just stopped trying." That was when the silence between us became heavy. Not angry, just full. Full of all the things I had given. Full of all the things he no longer noticed. That night, I sat alone in the living room after he went to bed. The house felt like a place I lived in, not a place I belonged. I realized then that forgetting is not always about memory. Sometimes it is about value. And somewhere along the way, my value had become invisible to the man I gave my life to. After that night, I became quieter. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I was tired of speaking into empty space. I still cooked, still cleaned, still smiled when needed. But something inside me began to fold inward, like a letter never sent. Daniel noticed the quiet, but not the reason behind it. "You're always lost in thought these days," he said one morning. "You should try to be more positive." I nodded, because explaining myself felt heavier than carrying the silence. Days passed like that. He spoke about promotions and deadlines. I spoke about grocery lists and appointments. We shared the same house, but our worlds no longer touched. Sometimes I would catch myself watching him the way you watch a stranger on a train. Curious, distant, wondering how you once knew each other so well. One afternoon, Daniel's sister came to visit. She had always been kind, but sharp in her own quiet way. She watched us carefully as we sat together. "You look tired," she said to me, echoing words I had heard before. Before I could answer, Daniel spoke. "She doesn't do much these days," he said lightly. "So, I don't know why." The room went still. I smiled politely. I always did. But inside, something cracked just a little. Later that evening, after his sister left, I said softly, "Why did you say that?" He looked confused. "Say what?" "That I don't do much." He shrugged. "Well, you're home all day." Home. As if the years I held our life together had left no mark. I wanted to list everything I had done. Every sacrifice. Every choice. Instead, I said, I used to be more than just home. He sighed, tired already. That was a long time ago. Those words followed me for days. A long time ago. As if the woman I used to be had expired. I started noticing how invisible I had become to others too. At gatherings, people asked Daniel about his work. No one asked me anything. When I spoke, conversations shifted away. I felt like furniture. Useful. Quiet. Expected to stay where I was placed. One night, while washing dishes, I broke a glass. The sound startled us both. Daniel rushed in, annoyed. "Be careful," he said. "You're always distracted." I stared at the broken pieces in a sink. "I wasn't always like this," I whispered. He paused, then said, "Well, people change," and walked away. That was when I began to grieve.
Not loudly. Not openly.
But in small moments. I grieved the girl who believed love would remember her. The woman who trusted her sacrifices would be honored. I grieved myself. I found myself avoiding mirrors. Not because I hated what I saw, but because I no longer recognized her.
Who was I now?
Someone's wife. Someone's support system. Someone's background. I missed being someone's choice. One evening, Daniel mentioned a work event. "I'll be bringing Claire," he said casually. "Claire?" I asked. "She's from the office," he replied. "It's easier this way. You wouldn't enjoy it." The words landed quietly. "You didn't even ask," I said. He frowned. I didn't think it mattered. And there it was again. Not cruelty. Dismissal. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after he left. The house felt too big, too empty. I realized something painful. I had slowly disappeared from my own marriage. Not in one moment, but in many small ones. Moments where I chose peace over truth. Silence over honesty. And now, the silence was louder than ever. When Daniel returned late, he did not notice the light still on, or the untouched tea growing cold, or the way I looked at him, searching for something familiar. He went to bed, without a word, and I stayed awake, holding a question I was afraid to ask. If he forgot everything I gave up, did he still know who I was? The turning point did not arrive with shouting. There were no slammed doors. No raised voices. It came quietly, the way the most painful truths often do. It was a Sunday afternoon. The kind of afternoon that feels slow and heavy, like the day itself is tired. Daniel sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. I sat across from him, folding laundry. The television played softly, but neither of us was watching. I don't know what gave me the courage. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the knowledge that if I stayed silent any longer, I would disappear completely. "Daniel," I said softly. He didn't look up. "Yes, I don't feel seen anymore." That made him pause. He finally looked at me, confused more than concerned. "What do you mean?" I placed the folded clothes aside. "I feel like I stopped mattering," I said. "Like the things I gave up don't count anymore." He leaned back, rubbing his forehead. "You're overthinking," he said. "I provide for this family. Isn't that enough?" The words were calm, reasonable,
And deeply lonely.
"I never said you didn't," I replied. "I just want to be acknowledged, to be remembered." He sighed. "You chose those things," he said. "I didn't force you." That sentence landed harder than anything before it, because he was right. I had chosen. I chose love. I chose us.
Il chose sacrifice.
But I had believed those choices would be shared, as oh, none of it matters now. I asked quietly. "That's not what I said," he replied, already tired of the conversation. "Why are we digging up the past?"
The past.
The life I built for him. Something inside me went still. Not angry. Not loud. Just clear. "I need space," I said. He looked surprised. "Space from what?" "From being invisible." I packed a small bag that night. Nothing.
Dramatic.
Just clothes.
A book.
The old letter I had written years ago. Daniel watched, confused. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To my sister's," I replied. "Just for a while." "For how long?" "I don't know." He nodded, uncertain, but he did not stop me. That hurt more than if he had tried. "At my sister's house. The quiet felt different.
Safer.
Lighter. She did not ask many questions. She just made tea and sat beside me. You look like you've been holding your breath for years, she said. I cried then. Not loudly. Not desperately. Just tears falling without shame. Days passed. Daniel did not call at first. Then he sent short messages. Are you okay? When are you coming back? I read them, but did not answer right away. I needed to hear myself again. One evening he finally called. I found something, he said. My heart tightened. What? That letter, he said quietly. The one you wrote. There was a pause. I don't remember reading it, he admitted, but I should have. The honesty surprised me. I didn't realize, he continued. I thought things just happened.
They didn't, I said.
They were choices.
Meaning?
Another pause. I forgot, he said. And I'm sorry. The words were small, but real. I did not rush home. Apologies need time to settle. But something had shifted. The silence between us was no longer empty. It was thinking. That night, I sat by the window at my sister's house, watching the rain fall slowly. For the first time in years, I felt something close to relief. Not because everything was fixed, but because the truth had finally been spoken. The days that followed were slow. Not empty. Just careful. I stayed at my sister's house longer than I expected. Each morning, I woke up without rushing. I drank tea while the light came in through the window. I listened to the quiet without feeling afraid of it. For the first time in years, the silence was kind. Daniel called more often. Not to ask when I was coming home. Not to rush me.
Just to talk.
At first, the conversations were awkward. We spoke like people who had forgotten the shape of each other's voices. I made your soup today, he said one evening, almost shy. The one you used to make when I was sick. I smiled without meaning to. That one takes patience, I said. I burned the first pot, he admitted. We laughed softly. Not because it was funny, but because it felt familiar. One afternoon, he asked, Can I come see you? I hesitated. Not yet, I said honestly. I need a little more time. I understand, he replied. And for the first time in a long while, I believed him. During those days, I thought a lot about who I was before everything else. Before marriage became routine. Before sacrifice became invisible. Before love turned quiet. I remembered how I used to write. How I loved early mornings. How I once had opinions I spoke out loud. I had not lost those parts. I had just set them down. When Daniel finally came to visit, it was a simple afternoon.
No speeches. No promises.
We sat at the table with coffee between us.
I didn't see you, he said.
Not because you weren't there, but because I stopped looking. I nodded. I should have spoken sooner, I replied. I thought love meant staying quiet. He shook his head slowly. Love means listening, he said. I forgot that. We talked for hours.
About the past.
About the years we skipped over. About the things we both assumed instead of asking. He admitted he had taken comfort for granted. That he thought stability meant nothing was wrong. I admitted I had shrunk myself to keep the peace. Neither of us blamed. We just told the truth. Going home was not dramatic. No music playing.
No doors closing slowly.
Just a quiet return. The house looked the same, but it felt different. Like a place waiting to be lived in again. Things did not change overnight. Daniel still forgot things sometimes. I still felt old habits pulling at me. But now, when something hurt, I said it. And when he noticed me pulling away, he asked why. We were learning. Slowly.
Carefully.
One evening, as we sat together on the couch, he reached for my hand. I never thanked you, he said. For what? For choosing us. For staying. For all the things I didn't see. I squeezed his hand gently. I don't need to be thanked, I said. I need to be remembered. He nodded. I remember now. I do not believe love is about grand gestures. I believe it is about daily noticing, about asking, about listening, about choosing to see the person who stands beside you. I almost disappeared before we learned that. Almost. Today, I take up space again. I speak. I rest. I say no when I need to. And when Daniel looks at me now, I know he sees more than the life I built for him. He sees me. If there is one thing I have learned, it is this. Sacrifice without recognition becomes loneliness. Love without listening becomes distance. But when truth is spoken softly and heard fully, even forgotten love can find its way back. These days, our house is quieter in a different way. Not the heavy silence that once filled the rooms, but a softer one, the kind that rests instead of presses. I still wake up early in the mornings. I sit by the window with my tea and watch the light move across the walls. The world feels slower then. More honest. Sometimes Daniel joins me. Sometimes he does not. And that is okay, because I no longer measure love by constant closeness. I measure it by care. I have learned that being strong does not mean being silent. For years, I believed love was proven by how much I could endure without complaint. I thought that if I stayed patient, if I stayed understanding, everything would balance out on its own. It did not. Love does not survive on sacrifice alone. It survives on recognition. I do not regret the choices I made. I do not regret stepping back from my career. I do not regret building a home. I do not regret loving deeply. What I regret is forgetting myself while doing all of it. If I could speak to the woman I once was, I would tell her this. You are allowed to be seen. You are allowed to be heard. You are allowed to take up space. Daniel still has moments where he falls into old habits. And I still have moments where I feel the urge to shrink. But now, when that happens, we pause. We talk. Not to win. Not to blame. But to understand. And that has made all the difference. Love, I have learned, is not about remembering big moments. It is about noticing the quiet ones. The tired sigh at the end of the day. The pause before words are spoken. The person sitting beside you, hoping you still see them. I share this story not because it is perfect, but because it is real. Because many of us give quietly, love deeply, and disappear slowly without meaning to. And because it is never too late to speak. If you're listening to this and feel unseen, I want you to know something. Your sacrifices matter. Your story matters. You matter. Do not wait to be remembered. Gently remind the world who you are. That day, when my husband forgot everything I gave up for us, I thought love had ended. I was wrong. Love did not end.
It changed.
And this time, it included me.